Her name was Carol Whitfield. 47 years old. 14 years at the same insurance claims office in Columbus, Ohio. And on a Friday afternoon, at exactly 4:45, her manager's assistant knocked on her cubicle wall and said the sentence that would end one version of her life and quietly begin another. "Hey, Carol. Greg wants to see you. Says it's just a quick chat. I want you to sit with that phrase for a second. Just a quick chat." Nobody schedules a quick chat at 4:45 on a Friday. Not if it's actually quick. Not if it's actually just a chat. Carol knew it too. You could see it in her hands. She told me later she remembers setting down her coffee mug very carefully, like the sound of it clinking wrong might give something away. 14 years teaches you to read a building. The way people avoid eye contact. The way a hallway goes a little too quiet. She stood up, smoothed her blazer, and walked toward Greg's office like she was walking towards something she already understood but wasn't ready to admit. Let me back up, because this story isn't really about a meeting. It's about 6 months that led to it. Greg Anders had been Carol's manager for 2 years. Mid-40s, the kind of guy who wore a Fitbit and talked about his personal brand in a claims office where nobody needed one. He wasn't cruel, not in any obvious way. He was hollow, the kind of manager who smiled a half-second too long, who complimented you in staff meetings and then somehow never remembered to put your name on the projects that mattered. Carol didn't think much of it at first. She wasn't the type to assume the worst. If anything, that was her flaw. She gave people the benefit of the doubt long after the doubt had earned its keep. 14 years of being reliable had made her almost incapable of imagining someone would exploit that reliability. So when Greg asked her, back in January, to mentor a new hire, just show him the ropes, nothing formal, she didn't think twice. His name was Tyler. 26. Genuinely pleasant, actually, which somehow made it worse later. He asked good questions. He took notes. He said things like, "I really want to learn this the right way," from someone who actually knows it, and Carol, who hadn't been told she was good at her job in longer than she could remember, felt something warm in that. Recognition. She didn't know yet that Tyler was Greg's nephew. Nobody had told her that. Nobody was supposed to. Over the following months, she trained him on the claims software, the client relationships she'd spent a decade building, the shorthand systems only she understood. She was, in the most literal sense, teaching someone how to become her. Here's the part that I think about the most, honestly. There's a particular kind of loneliness in training your own replacement without knowing it. It doesn't announce itself. It just feels, in the moment, like being generous. Like mentorship. It's only in hindsight, and hindsight is cruel that way, that generosity curdles into something else entirely. Now, I need to tell you something Carol did back in March, months before any of this came to a head, because without it, this story ends very differently. Carol had noticed things. Small things. Her performance reviews had gotten vaguer. Praise turned into phrases like areas for continued growth that didn't correspond to anything she could actually point to. She'd been left off 2 client calls she used to lead. And there was a comment Greg made once, offhand, in a meeting, something about long-tenured staff sometimes coasting, that he probably forgot 5 minutes later. Carol didn't forget it. She wasn't paranoid. I want to be careful with that word, because paranoia assumes there's nothing there. What Carol had was something closer to instinct, the quiet, uncomfortable recognition that the story being told about her at work no longer matched the person she actually was. So she did something a lot of us wouldn't have the discipline to do. She called an employment attorney. Not to sue anyone, nothing that dramatic, not yet. Just to ask a question: if something happens, what do I need? The attorney, a woman named 𝗫𝗫 Okafor, told her plainly, document everything. Every meeting. Every review. If they're building a case against you, you need your own case built in parallel. Not out of malice. Out of protection. So starting in March, Carol recorded her one-on-ones with Greg. Legally, Ohio is a one-party consent state, meaning only one person in the conversation needs to know it's being recorded, and that person was her. She wasn't trying to trap anyone. She told me she almost felt embarrassed doing it, like she was betraying some unspoken trust in the workplace. But she kept doing it anyway. Quietly. Every week. She never once mentioned it to anyone. Not Tyler. Not her husband, at first. Just her and a small recorder app on a phone sitting face down on the table. Which brings us back to 4:45 on that Friday. Carol walked into Greg's office. HR rep already seated, a young woman named Priya, clipboard in her lap, the particular stillness of someone who already knows how this ends. Greg didn't quite meet Carol's eyes when she sat down. That's usually the tell, isn't it? The people who do something they know is wrong rarely look you in the eye while they do it. Carol, he started, this is a difficult conversation, but we've made the decision to restructure the department, and unfortunately your position is being eliminated. Restructured. Eliminated. The language companies use so no one has to say we're firing you. Carol asked, evenly, what does the restructuring look like? Greg hesitated. We're consolidating the senior claims role. Into what? A pause. Priya glanced down at her clipboard. Greg said, Tyler will be taking on expanded responsibilities. And there it was. The whole shape of the last 6 months arranged itself in front of her, all at once, like a photograph developing. The mentorship. The vague reviews. The client calls she'd been quietly excluded from. It hadn't been coasting or restructuring or bad luck. It had been a plan, and she had been asked to build the very thing that would replace her. I imagine, and Carol confirmed this later, that in that moment, there was a genuine temptation to just say it. To lay it all out right there across the desk. But she didn't. She'd promised herself, and Denise had told her plainly, don't react in the room. React with evidence, later, when it counts. So Carol simply nodded. Asked about severance. Signed nothing that day. And walked out of that building at 5:10 p.m. with her face doing something calm that her chest was not. Here's where the story doesn't do what you expect. Carol didn't storm into the CEO's office the following Monday with a folder and a speech. That's not how workplaces actually work, and it's not how Carol worked either. She went home. She cried, she told me this without shame, which I respected, sitting in her car in the driveway for 20 minutes before going inside, because she didn't want her husband to see her like that yet. Then she called Denise. Denise listened to the recordings. All of them. Including one from late April where Greg, in an offhand and almost cheerful tone, said, between us, once Tyler's fully ramped up, we won't need 2 senior claims people. Keep that under your hat. He hadn't said Carol's name. He hadn't needed to. That single sentence, casual, careless, the kind of thing said by someone who's never imagined consequences, became the center of everything that followed. Denise filed a formal complaint with the company's board and legal department, not a lawsuit, not yet, a documented, time-stamped account of age-based discrimination and a hiring irregularity involving an unreported family relationship between a manager and a new employee. The recordings weren't dramatic. They were mundane, which made them worse. Just a manager, talking normally, revealing a plan he never thought anyone was listening closely enough to notice. The company's response wasn't a Hollywood ending. There was no dramatic firing in front of a cheering office. What happened was quieter, and in some ways more real, an internal investigation. Tyler's hiring was reviewed and found to have skipped standard nepotism disclosure. Greg was placed on leave during the investigation, and resigned 2 months later rather than face termination for cause. Carol was offered her position back, with back pay, though by then she'd already decided she didn't want it. She took the settlement instead and moved to a firm across town, where, 6 months in, she was made a team lead. I keep coming back to one thing Carol said to me, near the end of our conversation. She said, I didn't record those meetings because I thought I'd get revenge someday. I did it because I was scared, and being scared made me careful. That's the part of this story I think we get wrong, over and over, in almost every version of this kind of tale. We want it to be about catching the villain. About the satisfying click of a trap closing. But Carol's story isn't really about Greg at all, not in the end. It's about the quiet decision she made in March, long before anyone wronged her, to protect herself without needing a reason yet. Preparation isn't the same as paranoia. Most of us confuse the two, because we don't want to admit that trust and vigilance can live in the same hand. Carol trusted Tyler enough to teach him everything she knew. And at the very same time, she trusted the world little enough to keep a record of every conversation that might one day be used against her. Both of those things were true. Neither one canceled out the other. And maybe that's the lesson worth sitting with. Not that betrayal always gets caught, because it doesn't, not always. But that the people who survive at best are rarely the ones who saw it coming. They're the ones who protected themselves quietly, long before they had a reason to.